Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Sean Sweeney. I am the Director of Education and Special Programs at the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. We're really excited to have recently wrapped up our 2020 Board Leadership Award process, and we are excited to be joined today by our winner and honorable mention of this year's process to share the first of 4 topic areas that will be outlined in a series of educational videos that will highlight best practices that we were able to pull out of the award process this year. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Anne Schrantz from Cohn-Resnick, who is the award's sponsor. Over to you, Anne.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for their participation in this year's award. Certainly the center and our wonderful selection committee, of which Larry is representing today, and then finally our winner, ISPU, and Food and Friends, as honorable mention. It was a very spirited year, and we really appreciate it. And as an auditor, an audit partner at Cohn-Resnick, and Cohn-Resnick is a national audit and accounting firm. And when we thought about where we wanted to give back to the nonprofit space, board governance was an area that we thought was really important, given the nature of the work that the boards do, and really looking to see how they can impact an organization. And so we have 2 great examples of that today. And so just want to thank everyone very much. And I will turn it over to Larry, who will take you through this session.
All right, thanks, Anne. Hi, I'm Larry Robertson. I've been on the selection committee since 2012. The year before that, I was one of the members of the board of In Street Village. We were, I guess, the inaugural winners of the award. I just actually finished a career. Peter will talk a little bit about his career, but I just finished retiring from a career of almost 40 years in health and human service consulting, and began my career working in substance abuse treatment programs. Now I'm mostly doing nonprofit, organizational, and governance consulting. So I'm going to let Saima and Peter introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of get going with the questions. So Peter, you can start off.
Thank you, Larry. Peter Glassman. Professionally, I'm a veterinarian. I've been involved in Food and Friends for about 25 years, probably. I've been on the board maybe for 10 years. I am the immediate past president of Food and Friends. I'm involved in Food and Friends because I believe very strongly in their mission. We feed sick people. There's nothing much more basic than that in the Washington area, and in the exurbs as well. So we go pretty far out, go maybe 100-mile radius around the Washington area. So I'm very committed to it, and it's been a great experience for me. I happen to have been president when Food and Friends outgoing executive director was leaving. He had been director for 20 years, and his departure was well foreseen, and we all knew that he was leaving, so everything was very controlled, and that departure and the transition was something that was very positive, and something the organization knew was coming on. So that's sort of my background with Food and Friends, and Saima.
Great, thank you. Saima.
Thank you so much. I'm Saima Siddiqui. Thank you again to CNA for this honor. We're really excited to be recognized. I am a 12-year board member from ISPU. ISPU is a research organization that focuses on American Muslims, and we were actually a grassroots organization founded in the Detroit area, which is a large concentration of Muslims, moved to DC and became a national presence, and I've been lucky enough to be along for the ride for all of that, and I actually just finished my board term on July 31st. So I served as board chair at ISPU. I was chair of the search committee for our current executive director, and I've served as chair of the nominations committee, which has fully refreshed our board over the past several years. So lots of different hats, but it's been great to see an organization grow, and I'm excited to share what we've learned with everyone watching.
Great. So Simon, you were one of the I guess the last of the original class of
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So we're going to talk about the role that the board plays, and primarily in selection. Both of these organizations have had recent experiences with selection of new executive directors, or relatively new executive directors. So, you know, one of the things that people often say is that the selection of an organization's chief executive officer, whether you call it the president or the executive director, is one of the most important duties of a nonprofit board. And that's true regardless of whether you're talking about a new and developing organization or a high-functioning, mature organization like our two finalists here. Within the past few years, both conducted what we on the selection committee thought were really thoughtful, exhaustive searches, and they screened a large pool of prospects, and both ended up with highly qualified and competent executive directors. And while they each have fairly distinct structures, missions, and challenges, there are some themes that we thought other boards might find instructive in selecting, supporting, and overseeing executive directors. So we have some time, we'll talk about supporting and overseeing executive directors as well. So let's just kind of jump into the question. So I think for each of you, if you could describe the process that you undertook to source, vet, and select candidates. For instance, what did the search process entail? Who was involved? What and who were involved in also screening and interviewing candidates, and any other activities that were part of your selection process?
Sure.
Saima, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So we were lucky enough to have an interim ED in place. Our COO had actually stepped up as the interim ED when we were conducting this search. So we had the luxury of also being able to plan our search very thoroughly. So we first basically set up a brainstorming session with the full board. So to talk about what characteristics we were looking for in an ED and what we thought we wanted the organization to look like in the next 5 to 7 years, and what kind of skills we needed to take us there. So we built it as a really collaborative process in terms of identifying the key skills. And that really created the buy-in and the opportunity for everyone to express their preferences. And we talked to stakeholders as well. At ISPU, we work with a lot of external researchers and partner organizations. So we kind of crowdsourced some of that to make sure that we were listening to everyone, because everyone has an opinion about the future ED. And then we built our search committee, which included the interim ED, myself, the board chair, and then 3 members of the governance committee. And we built a timeline and then we really cast a really wide net, because we wanted to make sure we had identified some key characteristics that we were looking for. We wanted to increase our focus and impact as an organization. So really be able to, we're a research organization, so we want to understand that we're having a measurable impact on those we serve and those we inform. We wanted to build our staff and our budget and build a sustainable institution. We wanted to build up processes. We were at the stage as an organization where we really knew that we would benefit from standard HR processes, grant management, project assessment, dissemination. All of those things needed to be codified and not in any one person's head. And then we wanted to expand our reach of supporters. So we kind of knew some of the big buckets that we needed, and we cast a wide net. We posted on, Chronicle Philanthropy and Idealist and all of the regular places, but we also sent it out to all of our funders, to our board members, to any supporters, partners, networks that we were a part of professionally through our real lives, because we wanted to make sure that we were really bringing in somebody who was an experienced nonprofit leader, who had grown an organization before. And we ended up with about 21 viable candidates for that initial screen. So, and the initial screen was the interim ED and myself. We kind of went through and did our own screen and then ranked the candidates, and we ended up with 9 that we did first round interviews for. And the first round interviews were 45 minutes where we kind of went through the basics and decided who was moving to the second round. And the second round was with the entire search committee. And we also had prepared a an assignment. So we asked them to, because we wanted to look at their mindset of how they would approach growing this organization that was at an inflection point. So we said, can you prepare 3 to 5 slides on your first 100 days? And sort of how you would approach them, what you would think about, what you would prioritize. And it wasn't, we didn't want anything onerous, but we did, at that time, Zoom wasn't as common. So we did a WebEx interview with the entire search committee where they had the opportunity to present their thinking as well. And then we followed that with a series. We were down to 3 top candidates after that. We did a series of lunches in the DC area with former staff, board members who were in the area. And then for the final, we flew the 2 finalists to Michigan separately because a lot of our staff was still based in Michigan. So they got to spend a day immersed in the culture, meeting some of the other board members who were based there and asking and really gauging for mutual fit. So it was a process that was mapped out over a couple of months, and it had a lot of opportunity for real immersion because we wanted not just we wanted to make sure they understood sort of the entire breadth of ISPU and what was possible, but we also wanted to make sure that they felt comfortable moving forward. So that was kind of our process.
Like I said, it was pretty exhaustive. So you pretty much cast your net far and near.
We did. We wanted the familiarity with, we wanted the characteristics that we looked for. And I remember this because I just looked through our spreadsheets yesterday, but you know, we looked at how have you grown a nonprofit? So what was your budget size managed and staff size managed, but also growth trajectory, because we wanted to see that you knew how to grow something. We wanted some public policy and research experience, but we also wanted a familiarity with the American Muslim culture. So it didn't we didn't know what that looked like, but we didn't want to preclude a lot of searches that are very, that are based in a certain ethnicity or religion tend to be limited to that, to people of that faith or people of that background. And we didn't want to do that because we knew that our priority was really understanding how to grow and run a nonprofit well, that was the key.
Yeah, and I think one of the essential points that you've made is the need to bring someone in to continue the trajectory of the organization, both in terms of the content of what the organization addresses, but more importantly, or equally important, the development of the organization or the maturation of the organization. So yes, that's an important point, because bringing someone in to start an organization is very different from bringing someone in to kind of help an organization thrive. Those are two different functions. And
yeah, so, exactly. And we wanted somebody who built, and just I was talking about the operations piece for our research, we wanted to make sure that dissemination and assessment were built in, because those are things you need to go to every funder and talk about and show your impact. And you don't want to have to build that each time. So we wanted somebody who had the mindset that really wanted to build processes around all of these things.
Yeah, and I think the other key was this, from a selection point of view, you had multiple ways of getting looks at the individuals as they move through the process.
Yeah.
All right.
Highly recommend lunches.
Good note. All right, so Peter, so how do things go with Food and Friends?
Well, I think there are a lot of similarities. We started out talking to the board, obviously, about what our goals were and what really who we were looking for, and where we wanted to be the next 10, 20 years. We did have the advantage of our outgoing executive director being very positive and helping direct those ideas, and recognizing that, you know, this was an opportunity more than anything to move the organization in a different direction while maintaining, obviously, the mission and the important work that we do. So we had those initial meetings with the board. We selected a search committee, and the search committee was purposely broad. There were 7 members, 1 major donor, 1 sort of former employee who's continuing as a volunteer, very committed to the organization. 3 past presidents, and I think a couple of board members. So mainly made up of the board. We did, at that point, made the decision that we wanted professional help in our search. And so we did a search for an executive search firm and found a company in Washington who had a nonprofit division. I actually was familiar with the woman who was the head of that division. And I know that I knew her family, and her family is very philanthropic, very well known in Washington. And I personally felt very comfortable with them, and that's who we ended up going with. And I'm very glad we did. They were much better at organizing the search and setting the specific goals early on, and setting a process that was well beyond my meager capabilities. So I'm glad we did that, and we followed their direction. But the search committee was deeply, deeply involved in setting the goals and the trying to decide who we were looking for. And we did, respect the conversations that we've had with with the full board. And we're really thinking outside the box and viewing this as an opportunity to explore, other ideas about where the organization could go. As it turned out, sort of skipping ahead, we ended up hiring our program director, much to everyone's surprise. So Carrie Stolfus is our new executive director. She was selected. She went through the process. We really never expected her to be the final selectee, but we were very impressed with her knowledge of the full domain, her ideas about where she wanted to take Food and Friends. We knew her competencies. She had been a superb program director. Program director is responsible for, as we say at Food and Friends, getting the cheeseburgers out the door, managing the food, the processes, the processing, volunteers, pretty much everything the organization does other than fundraising. It seemed to us that fundraising was a weakness of hers, but she actually, in anticipation of this event, had gone and got some training and got a little more background and depth in fundraising. So we're really very comfortable. Carrie is much different than the outgoing executive director. Carrie is a hugger, whereas Craig was a handshaker, kind of a bland hander. But Carrie is, what struck us was her empathy, her understanding of her clients, which was the work that she'd always been doing at Food and Friends. She had been at Food and Friends for 15 years. And her interview process, our interview process was very similar to Saima's. We interviewed maybe 8 or 9, the full search committee interviewed maybe 8 or 9 in person. We got 3 or 4 back, including Carrie. We gave them an assignment and they did a presentation, and we were sort of blown away with Carrie's command of the domain, but also her vision and her presentation was superb. So the selection was actually pretty easy. We did not have to take Carrie to lunch, and we didn't have to send her to Detroit. We knew her pretty well, so it ended up really quite great for everybody.
So what's in common between both of the stories you each just told is how comprehensive and inclusive your process was, that you both realized that you needed to kind of cast a wide net. You needed to include not just the board participants, but also outside of the board to get really good views. And you also, it seems as if you were both looking at what the circumstances of the organization was at the time and what would best fit. What's also interesting, though, is that I think in your case, Peter, you ended up with someone you didn't expect, despite the fact that you did a wide search. But what's great about that is the fact that you gave yourself an opportunity to look out and within the organization and came up with the best candidate.
Yeah, it was really, really important that we cast the wide net, that we committed to doing a legitimate search. You know, if we had just said, "Well, Carrie, you're the one. You know the organization, and we're very happy with your performance, and so you're going to be our new executive director," that never would have carried. She never would have had the legitimacy that she does now. So both personally and to all of our stakeholders, it was important that we do a thorough search. We did a national search. Russell Reynolds went through probably 100 or so applicants, gave us 25 that we winnowed down and interviewed 8 or 9. So it was a rigorous process that Carrie went through. This was not, oh, she happened to be here and she's competent. She clearly, we ended up with the best of the bunch. There wasn't any question.
So the other common theme is that you both engaged in a process that increased the degree of objectivity of the process and transparency, and that there was not a foregone conclusion. I think it was probably even a thriller ride for you because you had no idea how it was going to turn out, it sounds like. But the advantage to that, I think, is the legitimacy, as you mentioned, Peter, that comes out of it. You have a degree of certainty, and no one can doubt that you ended up making the best decision that was on the table.
Yeah, that's true.
So you both had different attributes that you were looking for. Can you just walk through how did you determine what was most important to consider in the selection at this point in time again?
I think for us, it was clearly, it was clear because we had seen, we kind of mapped out our growth and mapped out what are our key areas. And we, as we mentioned during our interview process, Larry, was we were also making a focus pivot at this time. Mm-hmm. So we were going from having a much broader mandate to really having a mandate that was focused on, you know, domestic challenges and, you know, policymakers and communities across the United States. And so we had a couple of key things that we were looking for, and we kept them front and center in every phase of the interview. So each interviewer would fill out an assessment sheet with targeted questions about the areas that we were interested in, and have an area where they could say, please, next person, please drill down in this, mm-hmm. Because this is where we're not comfortable. You know, the issue about public policy, for example. Our current ED came from a public health background, which does not really overlap with what we do. So we had to constantly reassess, how critical is this compared to this? Like, we were reweighing and assessing all the time. So we had sort of an elaborate system of matrixed, you know, breakdown of where we saw gaps. And it really came down to what are the things that we can't trade off on, and what are the things where we think, you know, you can upskill and learn or develop familiarity, or maybe you're just changing the game in certain areas altogether. And so you don't really need those skills. So we were very now that I'm looking back at our records, very, very rigorous in terms of making sure that everyone was documenting exactly what was happening so we could compare. And we had, I would say, like, the familiarity with the American Muslim community, I mean, that was an easy line on the Excel spreadsheet, right? Do they, don't they, do they have an interest, because it ended up looking like some people were just aware because they cared about it. Some people were aware because they studied Arabic in college, and they did Middle East studies, or they did a semester abroad. So there were different iterations of ways that people came to us with a knowledge and a caring that we hadn't expected. You just assume, oh, they have to be Muslim, or they have to be, American Muslims, or immigrants, or Native American, So it was really interesting how we found out that our own thinking was broadened by this process.
And did you all anticipate that when you started the process that your selection was going to be Muslim?
I hoped that we did, but I don't think we did. I think it really took meeting all of these people who, like allies from the Jewish community who said, oh, we can bring some of the lessons learned to this process, just different ways of approaching this and making us more effective and stronger. So I think even the process itself really helped us learn and grow as an organization.
Well, and it sounds like one of the things that you both had the opportunity for introspection on was really parsing out what is essential to making that person, and that what are the ingredients that are important to a successful reign as executive director, and particularly given where you were in your point in history. So Joe, Peter, one of the things that you mentioned was that there was a need to look for to kind of beef up a little bit in the fundraising area. But as I think about kind of what you all brought to the table in terms of this competition, is that your board had a pretty good track record at fundraising. And so, while
I'm not sure the board would agree with you, but okay.
Well,
you can always be better. It can always be better.
No. We've looked at a lot of boards, but you guys really had been pretty much rocking and rolling on that. And so, considering that, it may be that you had someone who had the aptitude for resource development and maybe not as much of the historical experience in doing it. And so you could probably, was it a fair statement to say that you could take a little bit of a gamble and improve
Absolutely.
that person because you all were pretty solid there?
Well, I mean, the board was pretty solid there, but the organization was solid there. I mean, our development services is pretty advanced. The organization is mature. We've got a good pool of donors, and we've got a good pool of volunteers. And so it's obviously critical that a leader provides, communicates well, and is able to communicate the vision, the mission of the organization in order to get support. Right. On the other hand, there's plenty of infrastructure there and existing history that permits a little bit. It's a broader attack than just a top-down attack. So, hate to use that word attack, but fundraising is an art, not an attack. So it was not a make or break. I mean, what impressed us, there are three things I think that we were looking for in a new executive director. Obviously, competence, both in knowledge of the food industry and healthcare, and running an organization that was a pretty good sized organization. They had to be empathetic. They had to understand our clients and be committed to the mission and what we were doing. And then finally, we really felt like this was an opportunity to go in a different direction. I think every organization gets a little bit stale after a while. And our executive director had been leading the organization quite well. He was very well known in the community. but he'd been leading it for 20 years. So we were very, very open to new ideas and new suggestions. And so those really were the critical things we were looking at. Fundraising is part of competence, I think, but it was not particularly important.
So obviously you all had the desire for folks to kind of hit the ground running, but you know, they walk into a new position. In your case, Peter, she walked into a new position, but not a new organization. In Saima's case, you have someone who walked into a new position in a new organization. So how did you all go about the whole onboarding process? What was that? What was involved in making sure that this person was as familiar not only with their role, but in ISPU's case, the organization as they could possibly be?
I think one of the, and again, I'm going to talk about Detroit, but I'm pretty sure we sent Mayura to Detroit for 2 weeks to spend time, because at that time we still had a lot of our team there. And because we had the interim ED who had moved back, I believe, into the COO role once we hired Mayura, they just had a lot of, he ensured that it was a really immersive experience. So on the information side and the exposure side, that kind of took care of itself, and it took a little bit of the burden off of the board that had been so heavily involved in the search to have to, you know, make sure that the onboarding was complete, because we knew it was being done by this person who was then going to head off into a different role. But we did one-on-one calls. We spent a lot of time exposing, you know, having her talk to previous staff members. We'd had a previous ED. I mean, we also have, we always say, you know, you can never leave the ISPU alumni family. And so you're tapping back into founders, you're tapping back into previous partners and donors. So we made sure that she was fully immersed in, and then I think because of the COO being there, I feel like she was given the time to focus on one piece at a time. So, you know, she really wanted to focus on this research focus area. So that was a focus while he was dealing with the fundraising team. And then, you know, she moved her focus. So it allowed her to sort of phase her immersion in a way that I think was really helpful, and just happened to be a result of the circumstances of that time. So very grateful for that.
Yeah, and I think one of the keys that I heard from what you just described was the word you used, the immersion into those areas.
Yeah.
So Peter, how did that go? Obviously there wasn't a whole lot of
obviously much different. So Carrie had been there and had very strong relationships with the staff for the past 15 years. Obviously this was a new role, and I think that the challenge really was not so much in processes or her understanding of the organization, obviously, but her taking on a different role with in relationship to the staff that she had known previously for 15 years. I will say that the staff was thrilled that she was taking over. She's very well respected and very well liked by the entire organization, the board and staff as well. Helping the transition was the outgoing executive director, who we hired for 1 year as a consultant. And Carrie used him sort of as needed. I think they had regular meetings every other week or something like that. So he was certainly a help, but he certainly respected Carrie's position and gave her plenty of room, and did not impose his vision on what the role that she needed to be playing. So that worked out really, really well. Otherwise, I would say it was, you know, we had budgeted for transition time and assistance and sending Carrie to get educated, or I don't know, I'm not sure what, but it was, we didn't spend that money. She hit the ground running, and it's been a very, very smooth transition.
A couple of other quick questions. I guess in relationship to the fact that both of you had some opportunity for transition that provided some continuity, what would you have done had there not been, you know, either an interim person still around or the retainer of the previous leader?
Hard to say. You go, Saima. I don't know.
I was like, what do we do? You know, that's, I mean, that's actually, to answer your question circuitously, one of the things that Mayura really values, our current ED, and one of the reasons that we hired her is because she's really, she manages people incredibly well and really believes in building a culture of engagement and empowerment for our staff. We have amazing staff who are, I mean, she's grown the staff as we had anticipated, the strength, the engagement, the longevity, the very low turnover, the growth opportunities. So, you know, moving forward, I mean, knock on wood, I don't foresee that we would have a situation where we wouldn't have that support. But yes, I think the board would have to, because we've built a culture, and that was our objective. We've built a culture where people leave for whatever reason if they do, but it's not because they're not willing to then hold out a hand to the next person and help them, you know, get up to speed and move in. But I have to say, we have excellent records. We have a Gantt chart, thanks to her, that maps out every move that we make for the whole year. So I think that a board member or even, you know, somebody on contract as a consultant could step in and help with that transition. And if we were faced with that opportunity, that's what we would do, because we do now have everything mapped out in a way that it would be easy to pick up if she won the lottery next week.
Yeah, that's the rule. I don't go by the hit by the bus rule. I go
Right,
by
exactly.
hit the lottery rule. So Peter?
I agree. I think the board would have stepped up and certainly engaged Carrie more. I would have engaged Carrie more. I had a regular conversation with her. I had a regular call with her once a week. But it was really pretty much a pro forma. Carrie didn't require a lot of oversight. If it had been somebody else, obviously, I would have been spending a lot of time at the organization and working with her, and our transition budget would have been called into place.
Yeah. So last question, and quickly if you can, what has been or what is the board's role in helping with the executive director's development, support, or oversight from the board's perspective?
We have, the board chair is who the ED reports to, and they have meetings every 2 weeks. They work together to develop the agenda for board meetings and do performance discussions. That's the person who conducts the performance appraisal for the ED. I have to say that's one area that we're trying to build up now, is because we've really focused, I think we talked about this in our sharing, we want to make sure that being on the board of ISPU is a professional development opportunity and growth opportunity for board members. And I feel like we can do a lot more to make sure it's the same for our ED. Like, we don't want them to plateau or feel like they've kind of, you know, used all the tools in their toolbox. So that's actually something we're building right now, and talking to the new, as we elect our new board chair this fall, about really building out quarterly discussions and sort of regular growth goals for the ED. Because I think that's something that we haven't paid enough attention to, that they really need to stay engaged.
But it's on the agenda.
Yes.
Yeah. So Peter?
Well, similarly, I think Carrie's primary contact is the president of our board. They have a conversation once a week. And certainly during COVID, it's been more often than that because of staff issues and just delivery of food delivery. All of the processes have changed. So our board president has been very involved with Carrie and setting up new processes. And certainly volunteers are handled differently. Food is handled differently. Delivery is handled differently. So all those processes have changed. And our board president is primarily responsible for overseeing that with Gary's.
It's a natural part of the evolution of organizations and how they mature over time. So, I know we're out at time. So thank you guys seriously about sharing this information with us. You know, one of the things that the selection committee is looking at constantly is the extent to which the board has an appropriate and pivotal role in its relationship with the ED. And the selection is, as I said at the beginning, kind of one of the most important things that you can do, and then following that through. And you both shared some really comprehensive approaches that ended up with such great outcomes. And so we appreciate that. So Sean, back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Larry. And thank you, Saima and Peter, for joining us for this video interview. We really appreciate your time and expertise and willingness to share your processes. So everyone, that's it for us for today. We really appreciate you logging in and watching. Hopefully you found it useful and you'll be able to use some of the tips and tricks learned into potentially, or to implement them potentially into your own processes. So thanks again so much. Stay tuned for 3 more videos that will be released soon. And just thanks again so much for joining. Have a good rest of your day.